welcome to the On the Whistle podcast. I am here in a very, very rainy, cloudy, miserable Philadelphia. I'm not gonna lie, I was hoping the US would be a bit warmer. Miami was too hot, but Philly is struggling. We're back here with Lorenz. Lorenz, the last time you were on the pod, a couple days ago, we were delirious. It was 1 a.m. We were in a hotel that neither of us actually were staying in, and we were chatting about the opening game between Al Ahly and Inter Miami. But now we're talking about the big one, and by the big one, I mean the big one for you and for all of South Africa. South Africa, we've come off the back of the Proteas winning. The Springboks are the champions of World Rugby. Bafana have done so well in AFCON. Banyana African champions. It's finally time for the club teams to step up. Of course, we're talking about Mamelodi Sundowns in their group at the Club World Cup. It's an interesting group. They've got Ulsan HD from South Korea, the big boys Borussia Dortmund from Germany, and of course, the final team coming into it is the Brazilians Fluminense. Lorenz, Sundown's first game up against Ulsan. Before we get into the games, I want to just briefly kind of touch on Sundown's season because it's been a bit of a weird season for Sundowns. Obviously, you're coming off the back of years of absolute dominance domestically, and particularly in the PSL, under Rulani Mokoena, kind of really established style, really established principles, kind of visionary in many ways in African football, seen as kind of the next great thing. He parts ways with the club, and it's a bit all over the place. And Kiwi goes pretty soon, early on in the season. They bring in Cardoso, different type of manager, meant to get them over the line in Champions League. He does better than Mokoena, but doesn't quite get it over the line in the end against Pyramids. Like, how do you assess actually the season that Sundowns have had?
Okay, guys. Yeah, I'm obviously here in Orlando. It's much hotter than than New York and Miami, and obviously even Philadelphia, where you said it was raining, but it's quite erratic. It's very much like Johannesburg, hot one moment, raining the next moment. But yeah, look, I mean the Sundowns, project leading towards the Club World Cup. I mean, qualifying for the Club World Cup, they didn't win a Champions League. They were there through consistent results in the CAF Champions League of reaching the quarterfinals, semifinals, and then just generally winning a lot of games in the group stage. Just all adds up in the coefficient system in the overall CAF ranking. So that even dates back pre Mukwena. When they were co-coaches with Mangoba Ngiti and with Coach Pizzo Musimani, perhaps even maybe a season for one or two seasons. So that all tallies up. So obviously this is a project that's been built on a solid foundation for year and year and year. So fans are not patient. This season Al Ahly, like, okay, Al Ahly lost. Never won the Champions League for like what, six seasons, 6 7 seasons, and then they win it 4 out of 5. Cheers. Sorry, that's just somebody in the house. So yeah, they've obviously now gone on a run like that. So Sundowns fans are looking at like, guys, we've been building. You know what I mean? So the coach who comes in needs to win it. They set the precedent. Rolani Mokoena was sacked, losing only one game, and that was the final game of the season. He was sacked because he didn't win the Champions League, and maybe some interpolitics within the club. So Cardoso had to come in. um, at first, the fans were like, we don't care if we don't play good football because we've been playing good football all the years and not winning the Champions League. So now perhaps the football is not to their liking. Yes, they're scoring on paper, they're scoring a lot of goals, but the fans are not really taking to the style, that gung ho approach. Very attack minded, playing in the final third, suffocating teams. Now it's a more balanced approach between attack and defense, um, and obviously it's different on the eye. So when you don't mix that with the Champions League trophy going into the Club World Cup, it's a bit frustrating. So yeah, I think overall, Sundowns fans, they have a mixed feeling going into this competition. They want to be surprised, you know. They expecting the worst and hoping for the best type of thing. Because they've just won one trophy, which is the league, which sounds weird to say, but obviously it's a trophy that they've won for what, eight consecutive seasons. Um, but I do feel that it's an interesting group, like you said. It's four different continents, And it's always interesting to see a team that is dominant in their region play up against a team that is dominant in their region, because the style of football is completely different. The approach is completely different. And it could, yeah, it just could just be very interesting because you won't see traditionally these teams play in this way. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think it's something that everybody is excited about. You know what I mean? I don't think the golfing class in the teams are particularly that huge, um, but I think Dortmund is the one that fans are particularly looking at and seeing. This could be a very tough game.
Yeah, and I want to put you up on that kind of stylistic point because I think it's so true, and that's one thing I love about the Club World Cup is you have these teams that are always dominant in their own leagues,
Mm,
coming against each other, and suddenly they have to adapt because not everyone can dominate, and we saw that in that first game between Al Ahly and Inter Miami, where Al Ahly are very comfortable actually just sitting deep, letting Miami have possession, and then being the more dangerous team on the break. I think
yeah,
Wydad culturally they have that in them. Naturally, a
yeah,
very defensive team. They don't want to dominate the ball, and
mm,
Esperance as well. They have a bit more culture of dominating the ball, but not so much in possession. Often like more kind of physical
mm,
dominance, kind of dominating the midfield. Whereas Sundowns, it is there is this culture, Shushan and Piano, all of that. Naskins, the Dutch philosophy, the Brazilians, everything. There's so much around that. And I find it interesting what you're picking up on. You're saying, at first they're like, no, we don't care about Cardoso, how we play, as long as we get the results. And then suddenly it's like, okay, actually, we do kind of care. We want to play our way. We want to play our. And I want to ask specifically about that Nedbank Cup because, like you said, in many ways, Cardozo was brought in not as the antithesis to Moquena, but seen as someone who can get them over the line in these knockout games, get them over the line when it kind of rubber meets the road. But he hasn't actually done that in terms of trophies. Obviously he's done well to get to the CAF Champions League final, but even the Nedbank Cup, they get knocked out by Kaiser Chiefs. It's from the gulf between those teams is in many ways a bigger disappointment, not because the club wants the Nedbank Cup, but because of the golf in class. Has that shifted the narrative at all in terms of Sundown's ability to play more defensively?
this is my personal opinion of what I saw. Um, but I do feel that loss in the Nedbank Cup semi-final really damaged morale in the season, so to say. Um, like in a sense of not only it was there's one team that Sundowns don't want to lose to. It's Chiefs. Honestly, it's Chiefs. Um, and like the whole discussion going into that game was like, we're gonna win the Nedbank Cup, we're gonna win the league, we're gonna win the Champions League, and then we're gonna go to the Club World Cup. So, like everybody rightfully says, the Nedbank Cup isn't the be all and end all, but it just is that fact that like mentally they were beaten, like by Chiefs that were dire this season, the Chiefs that were so erratic, so inconsistent. And then obviously that leaves a mental scarring in your team to say, like what happened here? You know what I mean? And I just felt the energy shift in a way. Like the coach always said, the boys are good. The players always said they're good, but it just something just didn't feel right. And this is just my perspective, like of coming to the game, hearing them, seeing them. You know what I mean? I just felt there's something a little different. And week by week, it went into the latter stages of the season where they did well in the league. They got a job. They wrapped it up, but the Champions League in these matches of consequences, they were just never convincing. You go back to the Esperance game. Even the group stages was also, you can't blame it on Cardoso. He came there when took, I think, in the second game or the third game. I stand to be corrected, but generally they scored one goal against Esperance over two legs. They scraped through against Al Ahly with a late goal, and then the final, everybody knows what happened there against Pyramids. So these matches of consequences are racking up to say like, where's the big performances? You know what I mean? But there was always this thing of, even in the Champions League, they were saying, there's three players marking Lucas Ribeiro. These guys are playing in a low block and not allowing us to play. But in fact, pyramids weren't doing that. You know what I mean? So look, I mean, it could be a stage where a player like Ribeiro like really steps up. The South Americans really step up. Alendi, you know what I mean? Because it's in a type of environment where I feel like the South Americans just didn't handle what the CAF Champions League requires, where you see more of the North African, West African talents really stepping up and thriving because they've got huge engines. They adapt better to conditions. You know what I mean? There's just so many outside external factors that make the Champions League the Champions League. You know what I mean? But yeah, honestly, this could make or break Cardoso, this tournament. If they don't perform well, if they don't, what's the word, make the country proud or
Mm.
be a good representative of Africa or good representation of Mamelodi Sundowns as a brand, he'll surely be out. I'm sure there were even like deliberations of, pulling the trigger after the Champions League, but you know what I mean? Like give the guy a chance, you know what I mean?
Mm.
So he really needs to not only play good football, but just bring pride, like there's a thing of pride. Like some teams can lose and they can go home and the fans will still be happy because of the way they played. And on paper you're looking at Ulsan, you're looking at Fluminense, and you're looking at Dortmund as theoretically more high profile play clubs or on the ladder. And I think what helps also to put it into perspective is the fact that Sundowns have been here before 2016. They got hammered by Kashima
And jump
Antlers
and
and
Jumbo.
John. Yeah, and it wasn't pretty. You know what I mean? So the fans are like cognizant of that, and they're not going into the Ulsan game blindly and saying, we're hammering them. But they need to win this game. Like let's not beat around the bush. They need to win this game.
Yeah, and I want to get into the game a little bit, but before I wanted to pick you up because you're talking about this sense of kind of bringing pride to the club, to the nation, and that's probably more relevant for Sundowns than pretty much any other club at the Club World Cup. I haven't done the maths, but I would be surprised if there was any other club that had so many internationals representing the country that the club is based in. Obviously, was looking back through the Bafana squad, the AFCON, and essentially when they play with that back five plus Ronwen, you know, four of them were Sundowns players, and one of them was like Kakana and not Lebusa. So it's like it's full of Sundowns players,
And
but
then
also
the two midfielders can also be Sundowns players as well in front of that back
exactly,
five. Yeah.
exactly. That's what I mean. And but also not only that, you're talking about brand and Sundowns. In South Africa, clubs are so brand conscious. Pirates, Chiefs, but Sundowns as
Mm.
well. And Sundowns kind of see themselves as this global brand. They're part of the Rock Nation group. They had DJ Khaled on the screen in New York Times Square. Sending a video of welcome, and they want to be this kind of super club. Do you
Yeah.
think that is kind of makes this even more important to them because they won't have another chance to brand themselves as that again until the next Club World Cup? How important is that idea of not just getting through, not just playing well, but actually building the Sundowns brand?
Yeah, I think it's imperative. Everybody knows what the next Club World Cup is in the next 4 years. Um, and it's not guaranteed that they'll be there. They need to win the Champions League. Pyramids have already booked their ticket. We can bet our houses or whatever we have that Al Ahly will be there.
Yeah.
And then either Esperance or Wydad, and then we'll see who takes the last space. Um, so yeah, it is pretty important. Like off the record conversations over the past couple of years, it was always meant to be this team was built to go to the Club World Cup. You know, you've got a lot of prime players. You've got Ronwin, you've got Mukwena, you've got Shalulile, you've got Alendi, you've got Ribeiro, you've got all these players like in there. They're not emerging talents. They're not. This is a prospect or whatever. These are players in their prime. Like this was meant to be a tournament where they're coming in as African champions and potentially market themselves for lucrative offers from, let's say, from the USA or from the Gulf or from Europe. And Sundowns look at that as then, okay, the project is completed. We are African champions. We maybe went to the knockout stages of the Club World Cup. We had a good account of ourselves, and now potentially we're allowed to sell maybe 2 or 3 players and continue building, and create a conveyor belt of young talent that comes through. But now it seems like that's not gonna happen because the project's not completed. You know what I mean? The project's
Mhm.
not completed. So yeah, football football is a very honest sport, and it's really you get an occasion where there's a team on a trajectory that's like, like this, and then all of a sudden they go like that. You know what I mean? Like, you can be hopeful to say maybe Sundowns just, like, they had a 5 week or not a 5 week break, they had a 2 week break. They've been on the training ground, played a couple of low-key friendlies, and now they're re-energized. Maybe the season took its toll on them. The whole of the team didn't go into the international break like many of the players at the Club World Cup did. There was no players at Bafana. Namibia didn't play either. Um, so there is that factor where the players could potentially be re-energized and show that maybe their subdued performances in the latter stages of the season were just due to fatigue, mental, physical fatigue. So yeah, I think that's the hope about it. But it is very important for them from their future standpoint, like, to attract. And we'll be lying to ourselves if we're saying not half the entire Sundown squad want to impress to move to a bigger and higher level. Like, that's the goal of this, you know what I mean? Same for
Mm.
Widad, same for Al Ahly, same for Esperance players. And they want to be the players, the club, everybody wants to be known as like that global brand. Because look, think about the World Cup. When there's a small country, like, let's say even AFCON, when Madagascar went to the quarterfinal, everybody was talking about Madagascar. Everybody was talking about Comoros at one point. Everybody was talking about Costa Rica at, I think, the 2014 World Cup. The goal should be like, hey, remember who's the Sundowns teams? You know what I mean? Africa, everybody knows Sundowns, but when you come into America and stuff, I don't know. They're asking you how to pronounce the name of the team. You know what I mean? So the end goal should be everybody needs to know how to pronounce Mamelodi Sundowns after after this
Mamelodi
tournament
Sundowns.
is
Uh,
finished. You know what I mean?
for me, I find Sundowns is bad, but for me, the other one is Wydad.
Yeah.
Everyone I hear, Wydad Casablanca, Wydad. I was like, oh my. It actually,
Yeah.
it's painful. But Lawrence, I think those are really good points, particularly about this idea of building towards something. And we talked about momentum because in many ways, Sundowns have had the best season of the 4 African teams coming into the Club World Cup. They've certainly been consistently at the highest level, and yet it feels like they're the ones coming into the tournament with the least amount of momentum because yes, Widad had a really bad season under Mokoena. They just got into third. They've salvaged the season domestically. Same with Esperance. They win the league, they win the cup, they get there in
Different
the end.
energy. That's a different energy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And even Al Ahly with the terrible season they had, the controversy with the Zamalek, everything, the embarrassment of not even making it to the Champions League final, which is a crazy thing to say. But they've still salvaged it at the end of the season. And yet Sundowns, they were always going to win the PSL. There was never any threat of that. So they don't have that momentum. Looking
Yeah.
at these games, right, is Sundowns, as you said, they've got this kind of core of their defense, their keeper, and particularly at midfield to Allende and Mokoena. That is as good as it gets in my book. For me,
Yeah.
the big question is those ones going forward because no one in that front line has impressed me except for consistently over the season except for Ribeiro. You've seen shades of Shalilile, you've seen shades of Reyners. In the last few weeks in the PSL, you saw shades of Arthur Salles, really stepping up. Tashreeq Matthews, same. He'd been not impressive in the Champions League for me, but he still kind of played a big part in it. Who do you think is going to play in those kind of three positions alongside Ribeiro and ahead of Mokoena and Allende, or alongside them if they're playing with a midfield three?
I think I think you may be a bit too hard on Reyners. His numbers this season is really good. I think maybe he's got two, maybe even identical uh, goal contributions to Lucas Ribeiro. But when they were cooking, proverbially cooking, it was the Shalulile, Reyners, and Ribeiro front three. At times, Matthews came in and he was super effective in like the first few games of the season. He got injured when he came back. He struggled a little bit for momentum. So I think Tash just maybe needs a reset. Like, you know, maybe come off the bench, try and affect the game in the latter stages with his pace. And then next season, start again and have a really good season. Um, but it'll be interesting because Lebo Motiba is all of a sudden fit. He got a cameo, impressive cameo in the Champions League final. They've been saying that this dude is different class. Like he's a tank. His finishing ability is second to none if you compare. Like I mean, you look at Liga, it's like okay, his record is not that amazing, but you need to look at the minutes on the pitch to goals ratio, and it's decent. Um, and yeah, he scored a hat trick against I think Sarasota or Miami FC. They won their two friendly games 6-0 each.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's a very poor level of football. I'm not sure what the USL Championship sides are like. Maybe not the best barometer of quality or whatever, but that's another option. Letlaku, also a very young, exciting player that's here. Mabena, I'm not sure how fit he is. So there's a lot of attacking options that they can call upon, but I'm I'm pretty sure that um, that four that I mentioned, Tash, Shalulile, Reyners, Ribeiro, they will probably be used the most out of those players unless there's an injury or something really strange happened over the past 2 weeks that we don't know of. But obviously, yeah, Ribeiro, Reyners, they're going to be the ones they're definitely looking out for because Reyners has that pace,
Yeah.
ability to play off the shoulder. Ribeiro is just different class. Everybody knows his quality. And then Shalulile's experience, he's just like a battle ram, a good player to have. Like he tires defenders down. He forces mistakes out of defenses as well, especially for those backlines that like to play to play out from the back. It's just a little nuisance there.
Mm.
They call him a pressing forward or whatever you want to call it. So yeah,
Mm.
that type of player, obviously, it's not easy to play against.
And it's interesting because obviously, even if you have players who haven't been playing well, I think if like maybe Matthews, because suddenly you're playing a different type of football. Fluminense Sundowns aren't going to have 60% of the possession like they normally do. So suddenly, does it open up for someone who's more comfortable running in behind than cutting inside? Like suddenly you're almost looking for a different profile of player in terms of how you're going to get the better of these teams. And then, yeah, even more so against Dortmund. Dortmund are almost certainly going to dominate the ball. So then, yeah, do you want someone like Shelly? Yeah, great pressing forward, but does he have that turn of pace anymore, like Rainers, to really stretch the defense on the turn? I think there's a lot of conundrums there. The real
Yeah.
reason we're talking Lawrence going into this though is because we're previewing to see if Sundowns can get out of this group. That's the question. And so I'm going
Yeah,
to
look,
ask you, can they get out of it? How are they going to get out of it?
I'm usually very confident in saying this, but I don't know because you can say, oh, if Fluminense or Dortmund dominate possession, that it could leave Matthews or Reyners to have more space. But what about going back? What about the midfield that is used to having the ball and not running after the ball? What about a defense that is used to just recycling possession with Ronwin instead of um instead of being under the cosh, defending deep. But call me crazy. What if what Cardoso was doing this season was preparing them for this? You know what I mean? And then we go back into our conversation about the fact that most of these players playing with Bafana, and they played in a way at the Nations Cup in a way that they should probably be playing here.
Mm, absolutely.
Um, play on the counter, use space, be solid, use Tebza as a ball carrier. You know what I mean? Like, take your chances when you get them. You know what I mean? Don't worry about the position thing. You guys are all great on the ball. Mudau 1v1, different class. Modiba on the ball, top player. The defensive structure. These guys can keep possession. They can rotate possession. So they've showed at the international stage at the Nations Cup that they can do it. They can play teams that's better than them. They did it against Morocco.
Mhm.
So there's those facets to look at, and maybe Cardoso is that guy that was preparing them for this. To say we need to be able to switch it on from being pragmatic, being in a balance where the defense is attacking and the attack is defending. That's how I always like to say it. So yeah, dude, I honestly think it's a 50-50 chance. When this draw was made, all of us were looking at it like, yeah, Sundowns and Al Ahly wants to look out for. So yeah, I would say it's 50-50 chance, but they need to get a result or just at least avoid defeat against Ulsan tonight. And then obviously Dortmund is the second game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's for
let's
me why
see.
they have to beat Ulsan, because
Yeah,
if you don't
you
get the
can't
win,
you can't go to Dortmund with a defeat. Yeah, you
yeah,
can't.
exactly. It's done if that's the case. And
Yeah,
you say it as if it's a crazy thing to say about Cardozo almost sacrificing the rest of the season for the Club World Cup, but it makes sense in terms of what's at stake. We've talked about the brand, we've talked about the global, but even just you think the money, the amount of money, they're making almost double just from being here than what they would make if they won the CAF Champions League. If they get out of
yeah,
the group, that's setting up. I'm sure Pirates and Chiefs fans won't like to hear it, but that's setting up Sundowns to make this 18 PSL titles in a row, not just eight, and to kind of really
yeah.
become just kind of absolutely dominant.
Obviously, it's gonna be a nice windfall for them. I saw the other day when Al Ahly drew with Inter Miami, they got $1 million. If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's about
That's
that.
a
Yeah.
load of cash in rands. That's a high profile signing there for getting a
Yep.
draw. So that puts it into perspective. So obviously, it's gonna help. But like Sundowns have a crazy bonus system for the players. So the motivation is definitely going to be there to say, guys, like we're not setting us. Not only are we setting the club up for some crazy high profile signings, but that could also that could also let them be out, out of the
Yeah.
door. But also for themselves personally in their daily lives could be life changing as well. You know what I mean? Like this could literally, set up their retirement funds post playing career. So yeah, I mean, there's so many facets to this. Like from an African perspective, like the money that we're talking about here is ludicrous,
Crazy.
bro. Like
Yeah. And this is even it weighted against us, like
yeah,
even with the South Americans getting more, the Europeans, like it's crazy the amount of money that's on offer. I mean, we're talking, about the African teams, but you think if the most Auckland City, like this
mm,
part-time team of amateurs getting, what was it, like 4 million or something silly like that from
yeah.
just getting smashed 10-0 from Bayern. So it is crazy the amount on offer, and obviously it does change things. And I'm sure we'll do a
But
pod
but but, that, but
later
that's
on.
one of the but that's one of the stories of the Club World Cup. We are hopeful that this type of initiative like helps Auckland become a professional club.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like Auckland should be able to go back now and say, we've got enough for the season, guys. We'll put you on professional contracts. Um, we get I don't know. I don't know.
Yep.
Like there must be a way that a team from New Zealand. But yeah, that was the whole prophecy of this whole Club World Cup. I
Yep.
remember when it was sold to us and talking about like how the money will be filtrated down the football pyramid in each environment and stuff. So yeah, it will be interesting to see like if that actually happens. If it does, then
Yep.
yeah, we can say Mr. Infantino was spot on with this
Yeah.
tournament.
I think we'll have to do a pod on that at some point, probably in 4 years when the four qualifiers for the next Champions League are, yeah, Pyramid, Sundowns, Al Ahly, and probably Esperance, but and how those teams have won every single kind of domestic league since then. But it'll be interesting to see. Lawrence, love the insight, love the analysis as always. Obviously, you're in Orlando. You're going to be there for the game, so everyone tune into Lawrence's various channels, everything that he puts out, because it will be great. Lawrence, I'm gonna, right as we sign off, I'm asking the score tomorrow. What is it going to be between Sundowns and Ulsan?
I think they'll take a 1-0. They'll take a 1-0 and they'll be happy with it. Let's 1-0 and we move on.
Absolutely.
Sundowns.
Absolutely. We would all love that. I mean, I say we, everyone except for Pirates and Chiefs fans. Lawrence, thank you so much, brother. All the best. And yeah, good luck tomorrow.